So, Halloween. This is the 10th, 11th movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, what did you? I mean, my first thought initially was right away. I actually thought of her, of our like a Linda Hamilton Terminator 2 type of thing. You know, she's the one who's been preparing for so long, doing the John Connor thing or taking care of it. You know, and even bringing her daughter up to be this, you know, this prepared person.
Yeah.
But you know, ultimately ends up you think that she's failed. But anyway,
actually, that aspect wasn't too different from Halloween H2O. She changed her name and relocated, and she didn't have a fortified house, but she had been training to defend herself, and so there was a little bit of that aspect, even though they're in different continuities. This new Halloween movie is actually in what I refer to as the 5th continuity. You have what
ret continuity.
The retcon. So initially, you have what I refer to, and these are just my terms. I don't think they're within the fandom or anything, but there's the what I like to refer to as the Dr. Loomis saga, which would be Halloween, Halloween 2, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, and Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, which was the last film with Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis, and I think it was his last film before he passed away. And then you've got the first Laurie Strode saga, which would be Halloween, Halloween 2, Halloween 20 years later, and Halloween Resurrection. And now you have the Laurie Strode Chapter 2, which is the original John Carpenter's Halloween, and this new Halloween. And then, of course, you have the Rob Zombie Halloween 1 and 2, which I'm not really a fan of, despite having really good people like Daniel Harris from Halloween 4 and 5 playing a different character, and the great Malcolm McDowell. And then there's Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, which exists in its own continuity. In fact, the original Halloween is a film within that continuity. As part of the series, it is the worst one in the sense that it doesn't tie into Michael Myers at all. The idea was they were going to make an anthology thing. John Carpenter had said, well, we've done the babysitter killer as much as we can. If you want to continue with me on board as a producer, let's make each new Halloween movie a different monster. They tried it with Season of the Witch. Didn't work. Fans hated it because it didn't have Michael Myers, but it has been re-evaluated on its own merits, and on its own, it is a solid horror film. It is a really good 80s horror film with a great electronic score by John Carpenter, and I was happy to see him back involved with this film, the first one he's been involved with since the third one, as a producer and co-scoring the film.
Which is also known as Halloween hydrochloric acid instead of H2O.
Yeah. Well, that name drives me crazy. That was during that time when everybody had to MIB, MI, MI2. You know, we're that lazy.
Acronymize everything.
Yeah. We're that lazy we can't say. And H2O, so it's Halloween 20 years later. And then they call it Halloween H2O. It's kind of like Stargate SG-1. SG-1 stands for Stargate 1. So it's Stargate 1, right? That's just so weird, but
yeah, whatever.
Whatever. I actually had a really good time with this film.
Yeah, I had a blast too. I loved it, and I was actually surprised because I was a little unbiased because I hadn't seen any of the others. I had only seen the first Halloween, so I was still very unbiased in the sense because I had just barely seen rewatched the first one. Came into the theater with you guys, met you guys there, and we saw this thing, and it came out, and I was just like, wow, this is great. It's a great continuation from the first one. It's just Halloween 2 after all these other, retconning all these other episodes.
Yeah, and what I thought was really interesting is first of all, I want to reminisce with you. Do you remember going to see Curse of Michael Myers with me at the Murray Theater? We all watched it at the old theater.
I don't remember that.
Maybe you didn't go. I know
it's possible that I wasn't. Well, it's possible that I was. Which theater was it again?
The old Murray.
Okay, so. Okay.
So that would have been October of '94. But it was one of those films where we'd been going to see a lot of movies in the theater, and every one of them had been a hit. We saw films like Pulp Fiction, and I'm trying to think of some of the others. Stargate. I mean, so many. that came out that year. And then I talked everybody into going to seeing Curse of Michael Myers. I don't think anybody else in our group was as familiar with the Halloween franchise as I was. I was so excited. And it had a young Stephen Paul Rudd when he was still Stephen Paul Rudd, which the next year he would show up in Clueless as Paul Rudd. And now he's a fantastically entertaining actor who doesn't seem to age. And I think after we walked out of the theater, I was the only one who was like, "Oh, it was a good time." I think everybody else was like, "You're not picking the movies anymore." Like,
okay.
You were 3 for 3, and now.
Well, it's funny too because if it was 94, I mean, what a year what a year in our lives. I mean, we graduated from high school.
Yeah.
Pulp Fiction comes out. Like, I mean, what a crazy time.
Gump,
Yeah.
So many
That's
big
right.
movies, and I don't think horror, especially slasher horror films at that point, were kind of on the demise. We were still a year away from Scream, kind of reinvigorating them with Kevin Williams and the great late Wes Craven, the late great Wes Craven, and I miss that guy. But also, it definitely picks up where Halloween 5 left off, and if not being familiar with the franchise, totally confused. So I do apologize for that all these years later. But no, I really had no expectations for this film because Halloween on its own, and I'm just going to rant real briefly. Halloween on its own, the original John Carpenter 1978 masterpiece, is one of the most important independent films in U.S. history. It's not the first teen slasher, even though it is usually credited with that. Black Christmas, directed by Bob Clark, which came out a few years earlier with Margot Kidder, is generally the first teen slasher, although they are college students. And then, of course, you had Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then you had slasher films like Psycho, Hitchcock's classic, and the British classic Peeping Tom before that. But this is the film that basically proved to studios that you could make a low-budget horror film and get a young audience in there. However, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original Halloween is really not that violent. There are only 3 deaths in the movie. There's really no blood. It's not a gore fest. It's Halloween 2, which came out after Friday the 13th, sort of took the teen slasher movies into that realm of extreme gore. And the franchise has become more graphic. And I didn't know what to expect with this, if they were going to kind of go with that approach from the first film and make it more of a... I mean,
suspense.
Carpenter kind of considers it to be his ode to Hitchcock. And even Hitchcock had said that it was a good film, according to Janet Leigh. Janet Leigh, who played Marion Crane in Psycho, is in John Carpenter's The Fog, which was the year after Halloween.
Which was really fun, by the way. I really enjoyed that.
I love The Fog. It's a great score, too. But the reason why she's in The Fog is because her daughter, Jamie Lee Curtis, is in that. And they worked in, they were also both together in Halloween H2O as well, which I think was Janet Leigh's final film, or maybe not, but one of her final films. And Janet Leigh's the one who said that she had talked to Hitch, as I think everybody who knew him called him Hitch, so I'm just going to call him Hitch, like we're buddies. But Hitchcock said that Carpenter was like a natural successor to him. I think even more so than Brian De Palma, which, Brian De Palma spent the early part of his career doing films like Hitchcock, like even visually like Hitchcock, which is still amazing. Carpenter didn't. Carpenter has his own unique style, and just for the master of suspense to credit John Carpenter tells you what kind of a huge influence this film had. And so I didn't know what to expect with this sequel. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I said, I think one of the things I really enjoyed, of course, was the build-up. It fascinated me how they went, where the place where they saw him at the prison where they saw him. I did want to find out more. The one thing that I found that I was missing was I wanted to find out how they had caught him, because the last time, my unbiased view is that I saw the last time you see him, see him get away. You see she looks away, she looks back down, and there he's gone. Yeah. And the great answer to that was in this film they have that reversed.
Yeah.
She does the same thing to him.
Yeah.
She does the same thing.
So good. The
which
entire
was
audience went nuts over that. Everyone started
wonderful.
applauding. So you could tell who the Halloween, like the diehard Halloween fans were.
Yeah.
They did use dialogue that explained that Will Patton's character, the always reliable, always great Will Patton, his sheriff, had apprehended Michael Myers on that night, but they never explained how.
Yeah, see, that's... Yeah,
and that was a little weak. I definitely wanted, especially if it's a direct sequel, if they're new continuity and they're discounting the other films within this continuity, so it's just the original and this, I definitely wanted to know more. And there was a weird kind of balance because it had good moments of suspense, good sort of homage to the original, like Easter eggs to the original film, and moments that paralleled it and then would reverse your expectations, like the closet scene. You kept waiting for Michael to be in there, and then they subverted that, and just, like when they would show the clothing on the clothes rack out back, I kept waiting for him to be looking from behind, like he did in the original film, and they subverted that. And that was a lot of fun. However, there were elements of typical teen slasher movies. A lot of unlikable teens that you know are going to get killed, and you kind of want them to get killed, where their whole sort of backstory and character development is so shallow and cliched in that sense that it's almost unnecessary, other than, yeah, these kids are unlikable and they're going to die. And of course, there was an extreme amount of gore in this film. Not quite as gory as Halloween 2, 4, 5, and maybe even 6, but definitely gorier than H2O and Resurrection. And I'm not even going to talk about the Rob Zombie Halloween films. No offense to anybody out there who likes them. I couldn't get into them.
Yeah, let's not say we didn't. But really quickly, this scene right here, this pays homage to Halloween 2. Because he does this in Halloween 2.
Yeah.
He does the same thing. So... Anyway, for Halloween 2, I love the concept of I loved Halloween 2. I just watched it right after.
Yeah.
When he came home, I hadn't seen it yet, and I watched it.
Good.
And it was great because you have the whole second movie is in the same exact night. It's great.
Picks up right where the first one
right
left.
Exactly where.
It's
kind of
like you could take Halloween and Halloween 2, or the Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, and Army of Darkness, and you could all edit all 5 of those films into obviously not one film. But the Evil Dead movies can make up an entire 3.5 hour epic, and Halloween 1 and 2 could be a nice 2.5 hour epic because they just take place immediately after one another. And I really like that because at that time, the sequels didn't pick up exactly where they left off. The Star Wars films, there's a big time between the Godfather films, there's time between them. And with James Bond films, there's almost during that era, there's no recognition of the previous film or acknowledgement of the previous film. So to have that go directly into it. However, if you did watch them back to back, you would notice one is definitely more of a suspense thriller that's based on keeping you on the edge of your seat and having things hide in the dark. The Shape, as he is. And in the second film, it's definitely got that 80s teen slasher. You're going to get a syringe in the eyeball and throat ripped out and all that extreme gore. And it is kind of a thematic shift, especially on the visual aesthetics, but they still flow together quite nicely.
Yeah, they're very... It's like a 2 television episodes right next to each other to be continued action. Another thing that I found that was really cool about this is the once again switch places this of Jamie Lee Curtis's character. Forgive me, what was her name again?
Laurie Strode.
So Laurie switching places with Mike Myers. In the original, she's hiding in the closet and he's coming after her in the closet. There's another switched out scene where she's searching for him in the closet. And, of course, anyway, I'm not going to spoil that. But, there's some really cool things that they did to reverse roles and that.
Yeah.
So
like the daughter and her high school scene where she's sitting there in what looks like the same classroom that Laurie Strode would have been in the original film. Like that was the intention. Obviously it's a little different because it would be 40 years later. But and in the original film, Laurie Strode's in the classroom. She looks out the window and she sees the Shape staring at her, Michael Myers, from across the street. In this film, it's the granddaughter. She looks out the window and sees her grandmother staring at her, and that was really clever. Or the way that the trick-or-treaters ran into Michael Myers the same way that the kid Tommy that Laurie ends up babysitting in the original film, after he's been made fun of and his pumpkin's been smashed, he runs down and runs right into Michael Myers the same way.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Very clever. Plus, I think this is the first film since the second one that used a lot of the same stings musically that the original film used. I mean, the theme runs concurrent through all of them except for Season of the Witch, but this one had that little diddy-doo.
Yeah.
You know, I think they may have even done that in H2O, but I can't remember. It's been a while. But I mean, by the time you get to 4 and 5 and 6, they kind of abandoned that aspect. And it was, I don't know, it was really nice. A lot of parallels to the original, so it does kind of bookend it. If you just watch these two, it works, it flows.
One of my favorite things about this franchise so far, and I haven't seen every single one of them, but so far that I've seen, is that when you're watching one of these movies, you tend to look at, I was telling you guys the other night, you tend to look at all four corners, trying to see if you can notice something, because there's the subtleties are so prominent in this, and you have to watch out for them, because sometimes you'll see that mask pop up in random places. So.
And what I love too is it's still the William Shatner mask. I mean, it's obviously not an original mask, but I love the fact that Michael Myers' mask in the original Halloween film is a William Shatner Captain Kirk Star Trek TOS mask. They changed the hair and they painted it white, and it's weird because it's Shatner's face going around on a serial killer.
It is actually really funny. When I first found out about that, because people were like, yeah, you didn't know that? You didn't know it was a William Shatner, or it was a Captain Kirk mask? I'm like, what? I didn't, anyway, I had no idea. But what would be, if anybody ever wants to make a parody and have William Shatner in the movie.
Oh, I'd love, you know what? That would be, I mean, of course it would descend into self-referential, but horrible. Just having Shatner in a small scene as a character maybe who gets killed or doesn't, just being in the film and seeing Michael Myers, that would be could be a good sketch. But I'm just going to quickly just kind of mention a couple of things that I liked about the film, if you don't mind, because I mentioned some of the things that I didn't like. The teenage aspect. I mean, they have to do it that way, but it seems like the teenagers in the original film, Laurie Strode and her friends, were a little bit more believable, I guess, in the dialogue, the delivery of the dialogue, and the acting. But what kind of made the difference for me is I loved the cinematography in this film. I need to find out who the DP was, because Chris and I were talking about it last night afterwards, and we were talking about what else he had shot. And I was impressed by, oh yeah, that's a good film. Okay, and so he's a solid director of photography. And I really loved Jamie Lee Curtis in this. She's great in Halloween and Halloween 2, and she's really good in H2O and Resurrection, even though, spoiler, she dies at the end, different continuity. I think she really did a fantastic job in this film of really bringing a nice range of emotion. Judy Greer was really good. Will Patton was really good. Toby Huss is always good. So from the adults and even the granddaughter, I'm not familiar with the actor, so I can't remember her name, but the performances and the dialogue and the cinematography and the music and the editing really, for me, made up for some of the shortcomings in some of the cliched aspects of teenage slasher movies. And the amount of gore, it was just enough to satisfy me. Did you hear people in the audience that were just like, ooh, And I'm just like, yep, bring it on. Mm-hmm. Yep, that teenager's going to die. Let's see it happen. Shut that guy up.
The most surprising part of the film is when they throw her cell phone into what looks like to be like, ice cream punch or some crap. Apparently it was pudding, but I just would never see. You don't see something like that at a dance. But apparently, this is 2018. People like creamy stuff. Apparently,
yeah. We haven't been in the high school for a while. Maybe pudding is all the rage at these prom parties. Maybe people like to spike the pudding these days instead of the punch. I don't get it. That was a little.
It was just. I think it was just a way of they could have just had it been in punch, but these days with cell phones they might be almost immune to the
water resistant.
Or whatever to the punch. So
what I didn't understand, why she didn't smack the crap out of that kid for destroying her $500 phone. I mean, it looked like it might have been, if that was an Apple X. Holy crap, that's $1,000 phone. That kid would have gotten a broken nose if it was me. But
these
who
days,
does that?
Anyway, we appreciate you guys so much. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. What did you think of this movie? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it was as good as the original? Do you think it's better than the original? Did you appreciate Jamie Lee Curtis's performance? Did you like the new version of Mike Myers? Do you like how they continued this? Did you like what they did with him at the prison? That was definitely a different part about that. Seeing with that whole squares, they had to stand outside the red square. If you step inside the square, which that was kind of interesting, kind of a different take on that type of thing.
Let me ask you this: what did you think of the opening credits sequence?
Oh, that was great. It was the
deflated pumpkin that inflated,
reinflating itself. That was great. Especially, do they do that with the first two? They do that all the time. Having
the first one's just the pumpkin, right?
Right,
which is great. And the second one, the pumpkin opens up and there's the skull in there.
Right.
That's great. And then the third one, again, not Mike Myers, but it's a digital rendition of a pumpkin. What? So you would recommend this film then?
I thought it held right up to the first one. Part of me wants them to still consider bringing the second one in because it still fits in. Although, spoiler alert, he gets charred pretty much at the end of the second one. But then I'm sure that leads into other supernatural things. But and I guess that it makes sense the reason why they didn't have him. But I thought it was definitely just as good as the first one, at least. I don't know. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah, I did.
I did too. I liked another fact is that Nick Castle, who played the Shape in the original film, and I believe he was just in the original, but he came back to play the Shape again in this one. Obviously, for me, the original Halloween is almost untouchable, and it will always be just a notch above the other sequels. But I would give this a solid 3 stars as a good follow-up to a 4-star classic. A really good, entertaining film, and this is the time of the year to see it. I would like to know if any of you out there have seen it and what you thought of it. Like Ben said, how it rates as a sequel. If you liked it, hated it, loved it, indifferent, I'll always love engaging in the comments. So,
thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you so much. We're just about to hit our 600 subscriber mark.
Ooh.
We're getting close. We're getting close to it. So
nice.
We appreciate it. If you like this video, give it a like, give us a subscription, hang out with us a little bit more often. We love talking about movies, and we love talking with you about movies. This is The Fanatics of Film. My name is Ben.
And I'm Joe. And let us know what some of your favorite horror movies are.
Thanks so much for joining us. Have a splendid evening.